Good morning, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at 3945 Southwest 86th Avenue here in Portland. We're located down in the basement. We have it's a 3.5-inch cap, but it's hooked up to it's either 3.5-inch cast iron or 4-inch cast iron. It's more than likely 4-inch with just a 3.5-inch cap here. Anyway, we're going to insert the camera and check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. We cannot run water during this sewer scope here because the way the cleanout's set up, it'll let water pour out onto the floor. And we're going to try and do this one dry, but I've done multiple toilet flushes here prior to putting the camera in the line, so water has been down the line. Anyway, here we go. Transitions here over to concrete pipe. Looks like it's making a flush transition. It appears to just be 4-inch concrete pipe here. We've got a little bit of, it looks like dirt that's come in from that joint there. What actually causes this most of the time, if you don't have roots in and amongst it, sometimes you will have roots, but you can see, if you look at the bottom of the pipe, there's an earthworm down there. And it's actually due to earthworms tunneling in and out of the pipe joint that push the dirt through like that. So to a certain extent, that joint's compromised, although worms can fit through some incredibly tight spaces. We have roots that are coming through right here at 18 feet. There's a decent chance there may be small roots underneath that kind of dirt mound there we saw at that first joint. We just can't see them because the dirt is there, but it could simply just be a worm tunnel. We've got more roots here at 30 feet. And more roots coming through here at 53 feet or 54 feet. We have more roots just up ahead of the camera here, and this might be as far as we're able to get. We'll see if the camera will move at all. And we're still inching our way here. Without the water running, though, there's a good chance that the camera may stop up here at a certain point. But at this point, with the roots being throughout the line like this, I'm going to recommend a full update. And that is as far as I'm going to take it there. It's getting way too hard to push the camera and risk breaking the camera system at this point. And we're 80 feet out. We probably made it the majority of the way out to the street curb. We have root intrusions almost immediately upon access, all the way out to 80 feet here. And I would imagine that there's still some distance to go. That's probably not the last root intrusion in the line. I'm going to go map this out. The advantage this line has here is that if you were to subtract the roots out of the equation, you have a very nicely functioning sewer line. It drains out beautifully. There's a little bit of water right off the bat, but it's nothing significant. So I would recommend in this circumstance, I would look into doing an epoxy liner on this line. And the reason that would be a good option is there are some massive trees around this property here, so those root systems aren't going away. What I'm concerned about is if you were to, at the very least, you need to either be fully replacing this pipe or doing a pipe liner, but the epoxy liners, at least in my experience, tend to hold roots out better. I would consider that, and it allows you to not have to dig anything up, punch any holes in the ground or anything. You just feed it right down the clean out here and you're good to go. So I would look into that option, but obviously whatever option you choose, pick one of them, but I think the liner would be a good option in this one. I'm going to map this line out here with white paint. And look at the camera head here. We're just in front of the hedgerow, probably about 3 feet from the street edge here at this point. So at this point here, we've scoped the vast majority of the line. Given the fact we have roots all the way out to 80 feet here, there's probably another 15, maybe 20 feet of pipe to go. But being that the majority of it's got roots in it, I would recommend a full update. Even though we can't see the rest of it, it would be a good time to fully update this thing. And I would check with the city. Off the top of my head here, I don't know if we're in Multnomah or Washington County. Multnomah County, though, the city does take responsibility at the street curb. So where we're stopped up here would be just shy of where their responsibility would be if we're in Multnomah. In Washington County, however, you're responsible all the way to the main lateral. I'd look into that before deciding how much of the line to repair here, but I would certainly take the repair all the way out to at least about 80 feet here where we have where the camera stops up, but it's also the last root intrusion that we have found as well. And at this point, I put a white X on the ground, and we are at 10 feet deep here. The locator is bouncing between about 10 feet and 10 foot 3 inches, so it's down there quite a ways. So given that, I would definitely be looking into doing a trenchless repair. It will generally, when you're digging holes that deep, or even boring it in, you're going to have to bore or do a hole to attach a line even if you drill it in. And digging 10, 12 feet deep, I think you're going to save some money doing the epoxy liner. And on top of that, the epoxy liners are essentially jointless, so they're much, much harder for roots to get into. And you don't have to dig anything up. That's the even cooler part about them. So pick whatever repair you want, but I think this would be a good candidate for that. And I'm going to do markings here about every 20 feet. The line pretty much runs in a straight line for the most part. It's not a terribly difficult one to, it's not convoluted, so we're just going to do about every 20 feet here. All right, at this point here, it drops off a whole bunch once you get, we kind of just went past a dive here a few minutes ago, about 10 feet in front of the camera, the line does a hard dive, which drops it down to 10 feet. Right here, though, it's only 4 feet deep. It's quite shallow. And that's it's due to that depth for the most part that you've got roots in the line. This is transite concrete. It's not aggregate, which is why it looks so stinking smooth still. The stuff holds up incredibly well over time generally. It's much more resistant to roots than average concrete. If this were regular concrete, we would have roots absolutely everywhere throughout this line. Not that we still don't have plenty of roots, but anyway, that's part of the reason why this is going to be a good candidate for a liner, is the pipe material, aside from the roots, is still in good shape. It's not rough, it's still very smooth and everything, but that shallow depth, though, makes it very, very easy for roots to get to. even better reason to do the epoxy liner. There's trees out here that are 100+ feet tall. They have massive root systems. My concern is that, and I've seen it many, many times, where people update lines and there's still active root systems around them. When you have trees this big out here, even new pipe has a very hard time holding up to them. So I would highly recommend looking into the epoxy liner. Very, very strong pipe. We're at 3 feet deep here. It's about 3 feet deep here. It is kind of veering underneath the little shed to the right of the house, partially at least underneath that, or the little ramp that leads up to it. Okay, located the camera head here. I'm just barely past the cast iron transition. I put a big white T marking out. Again, the line comes out the right side of the house, hangs a turn, and then does basically a dead straight shot from the turn all the way out to the main lateral, at least to 80 feet. And I was just told here that this is indeed Washington County, so I recommend a full replacement all the way out to the main lateral connection. Unfortunately, we can't see out that far, but when you need to update 70 feet of sewer pipe, there is no reason to leave any other pipe in the ground. Although the pipe in the roadway, I don't know what it's made of. Generally, when you hit a street, the pipe will often transition to a different material, and likely aggregate concrete, not this type of concrete here, that or clay. It's hard to say what it looks like. If it's transite, it actually has a fairly good chance of being in good shape because you're much further away from roots at that point in the roadway. But the way I look at this, you're 70 feet of the line already needs to be redone. To not update the whole line to me would be kind of a waste of an opportunity, but leave that up to you. At the very least, from 12 feet to 80 feet, I recommend a full update due to the fact we've got root intrusions. They're about every 10 feet or so, something like that. There's about 6 to 8 root intrusions throughout the line, but going all the way out to the street edges throughout the whole sewer line. Once you're in the street area, it's kind of hard to say. But we do have a little bit of standing water here at the very start of the line. This would be an ideal opportunity. It's not, in my opinion, not totally necessary to update this cast iron, but being how shallow the line is and everything, this is something you could dig up fairly easily and get replaced. Generally, I don't recommend repairing bellies until you have at least 5 feet of pipe with at least an inch of standing water. Anything less than that, it's entirely the homeowner's living habits that are affecting the flow with a belly smaller than what I just mentioned there. Like if you're flushing bunches of paper towels and things like that down the line. Regular old toilet paper, unless you're balling it up into like a football size, will shoot right through that spot where you just went through there. We're going to go ahead and reel the camera on out here. I highly recommend a rescope after the repair is done to make sure that it was done correctly. A lot of issues happen at the time of installation. You want to make sure that thing looks good before closing up the ground. But in an ideal world, I would update this cast iron section, at least on the exterior. Especially if you're doing a dig instead of an epoxy liner, which I would completely understand. It's 2 feet 8 inches deep at the cast iron transition, and it remains no deeper than about 4 feet up until the point where it drops off near the street. So the vast majority of the line is only about 3 to 4 feet deep up until about the last 10 feet that we were able to scope there. And then it drops way down to around 10 feet. So keep that in mind when kind of choosing repair options. Anyway, the cast iron, in my opinion, can remain, but it's a ideal opportunity to update pipe that's old and will at some point wear out. But that cast iron section there is still functioning and it's still in fairly good condition.